have modern human beings lost their attention span? I'm often asked that as somebody who both is a philosopher but also swims around in this world of social media apps, particularly YouTube. And I think I'd love to share with you how I recommend we analyze whether we really have lost the capacity to pay attention in a sustained way compared with human beings a generation to 3 generations ago. I have had some conversations about this with a man called Brian McGee. And Brian has many long-form philosophy interviews up on YouTube, which were television programs recorded in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And Brian died a few years ago. And he remained, I think, until the end committed to the idea that long-form, highbrow, or at least serious, morally serious content was always doable. It always could be brought about that such content would have a life. And that therefore, the idea that people no longer want it, that people want 30-second snippets, that they want TikTok videos, that they want YouTube shorts, or even they want videos of the kind I make on the main channel, which are 10-minute conversations with the world, but they are concentrated. They're concentrated. They're not going to leave you time to lean back and look at the ceiling and wait until the next sentence comes. And that is the kind of conversation we do have, the slow conversation on the chat channel and increasingly now in the live tab on the main channel. But Brian said it's always doable. So is it or isn't it? Let's put that question to ourselves now and then say a little bit about, if you like, how we think about whether it's us who have decided the shape of social media spaces and algorithms, whether they just cater to a kind of a slice of human nature, or whether they manipulate human nature deleteriously. I don't want to stand by that formulation. I'm deliberately saying something cartoonish that won't stand up to reflection. So let's look at this matter of, do we have it in us to sustain long form attention? And it's very important that this conversation is not settled the way Joe Rogan often thinks it's settled, which is to say, well, are there humans, very many kind of humans, who are going to listen to a 3-hour podcast? And the answer to that is, of course there are, because there are many 3-hour podcasts that are enormously successful. And the most successful podcast in the world is, 1.5 hours to 4 hours long, depending on the episode. But that's not a settler for us. It doesn't settle the question, because very often on Joe Rogan's podcast, we're going to talk about hunting. We're going to talk about shark attacks. We're going to talk about 2 or 3 culture war themes, really activate everybody. We're going to talk about diet and health. We're going to talk about fighting and combat. That leads us to this question, therefore. What more should be required of a culture to describe it as being long-form capable beyond Joe's stratospherically accomplished and successful podcast? And it's this. So mark my words, look me in the eyes. This is what the point is about. You don't measure serious attention span by people's capacity to listen for a very long time. You measure people's attention span by their capacity to listen for a long time without comprehension, without understanding. That's the definition of a culture capable of sustained attention, right? It's measured in terms of attending without comprehending. So, let's say we put somebody next to a high quality sound set up and make them listen to a Mozart symphony, and they don't know anything about classical music. It's going to seem to them boring, perhaps distractible, perhaps strange, perhaps unusual experience. They're going to be zoning in and out. They might run out of steam very quickly because it'll be almost like listening to a language you don't completely comprehend, or you partly comprehend. That's how you measure it, right? You put someone in front of a book that is enriching but difficult. I'm not talking about Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. I'm talking about a book that's just more dense than a brief reading of a sentence or paragraph from it will allow you to experience. It's the capacity to stay in there and be patient without comprehending. So this is a matter of an application of willpower. Right? Listening for 3 hours to content that is very easeful and almost intoxicating to consume is different. What we are talking about is the culture's capacity to listen in a sustained way and give time and give their physical resources without comprehending. Listening is an active process. Viewing is an active process. When you're viewing something you don't fully grasp, right? You're inevitably in that cycle of commitment, right? Without understanding of what it is exactly that's coming your way. So it's a commitment without comprehension. It's a commitment based on the idea that what's of value here is a process in time and requires not just to receive but to give. Requires you to give your nervous system, to give your authenticity and your personality, right? So what we've now done is made a kind of elementary distinction between passive and active listening and viewing. And we've defined that in terms of a capacity to attend without comprehending, and the capacity to not very quickly run out of steam as soon as you're asked to attend something which you don't yet grasp. And you're not going to grasp anything yet, anything straight away. That is the kind of thing that's going to make you grow significantly. You're going to have to just look, just stabilize your gaze, and then wait for things to happen. So let's now apply this to this platform we're on, which is YouTube. There are a lot of videos recently about what's been called the MrBeastification of YouTube. MrBeast is the most successful creator on YouTube, and he has essentially unparalleled success at sustaining a stable retention graph in the YouTube analytics. That means very few people drop off the video. And on the basis of the kind of framework we've put on the table, we can ask, is the fact that MrBeast's videos are doing so extraordinarily well a commentary on what we're really like, what humans are really like, or what humans in this culture are really like? Two different ideas. Or is it in fact something that manipulates us and makes us somehow against ourselves participate in the consumption of content that is neither morally nor physically good for us to put into our bodies. Now, I am going to defend MrBeast here, actually, but here is the framework. I think that what videos humans like to watch can partly be taken as a kind of a flat question. That's to say, a question about what humans will watch when you don't seduce and manipulate them into self-improvement, or even a temporary semblance of self-improvement. And self-improvement here is not to be tied with the self-improvement culture. Our self-improvement culture has very little to do with self-improvement, actually. So you can say, well, hang on, is it true that MrBeast is trying to maximize the algorithm for his own success? Of course, that's correct, what he's doing with great brilliance. And then is it true that the algorithm in turn is just trying to maximize human eyeballs? And the algorithm is just going to figure out, well, what's the maximal number of human eyeballs that we can sustain here? And, that's it. Yeah. And so I don't think that this kind of content with 28 cuts in 30 seconds is actually a disfigurement of what we are, a misrepresentation of what we are. I actually think it's a very real sociological presentation of what we are, with a huge but. And that is that almost as big a part of what it means to lead a purposive life for a human being is this idea that one is striving to cultivate what one starts with. And so what this sort of 28 cuts per 30 seconds content is missing and completely leaves aside is this idea that on the one hand it's true that what's really, really human is a video with 74 explosions that, cuts every 3/4 of a second. That's really, really true. But it's also really, really true that all humans, and some more than others, but all humans, have the capacity to cultivate that into something that is going to be better. But not just better because it's somehow more truthful or more sophisticated, better because it's more truthful and more sophisticated and also good for them. The kind of content that makes you work and the kind of content that makes you an active participant in it is the kind of content which it is better for you to have inside you the day after you've consumed it, morally and physically, than the kind of content that best keeps your attention tied in the moment. So I have a very, very big spectrum for human activity that is in fact about entertainment. And so I don't regard entertainment, including the kind of entertainment that is here this moment, gone the next moment. It doesn't transform you in any kind of constructive way. It feels junk food-like. But I'm a fan of that kind of entertainment as an ineliminable and beautiful part of human life, and I'm a fan of the idea that one form of human flourishing is to excel in the production of such entertainment. And a lot of what we take to be high art and high culture actually isn't, but is entertainment in my view. In other words, the bar for what we regard as high in our culture is set too low. And then what we're then going to find out is that if we knock down MrBeast and say, well, that's not morally or physically good for anybody, we're actually going to knock down Rachmaninoff too, who's a pop composer of genius, but not an composer of great revolutionary depth who evolved musical language. He's a kind of a neo-romantic relic and has great skills as a composer, but he's a pop genius. You compare Rachmaninoff to an amazing product that an amazing company makes, not to Schumann or Brahms. So what I'm really saying is that a world without superficiality is a world without human beings, without me, without you, and we're going to have to throw ourselves in the bin a little bit if we want to throw MrBeast in the bin, and this kind of 28 cuts per 30 seconds thing in the bin. Can't throw it out completely. And it says a lot about us. But what it leaves out, right, is this aspirational matter. And that's the sort of thing that I am committed in most, but not necessarily all of my YouTube content to cultivate, which is why I am speaking with you along different tracks, which all require different levels of active participation and so on. So that's a little bit of a take on it, but the brief nugget here is you don't judge a culture's attention span by its capacity to listen long form. You judge its attention span by its capacity to listen long form without comprehension.